This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Mayor Joe Ganim won endorsement from Bridgeport's Democratic Town Committee last month for another term, but that was easy compared to 2015 when he staged a comeback to City Hall after serving time in federal prison on corruption charges. Now the incumbent is up against petitioning candidate, State Senator Marilyn Moore. Today, Where We Live, Joe Ganim joins us to talk about why he's running for Bridgeport mayor again. Are you a Bridgeport resident? What kind of job do you think Joe Ganim's doing for the Park City? Does he deserve to be reelected? You can join us, our toll-free number, 888-720-WMPR, 888-720-9677. I want to welcome Mayor Ganim back to the show. He's joining us today from the studios of WSHU in Fairfield, Connecticut. Mayor Ganim, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and appreciate the time with you.
So to remind all of our listeners, many who are not just in the city of Bridgeport, you've served 6 terms as mayor of Bridgeport. There was a break in between. Looking back over the last 4 years, how would you rate the status of your city today?
Well, we're on the right track. Clearly, we took over when, it's all too common sometimes when you see large cities having budget problems. There was one that we inherited, police weren't underfunded, departments stagnation in some economic development projects. Look, we're getting things done, and there's more work ahead. But I will say that I'm feeling that over the last 3 years, with the help of so many people and partnerships, all the way around, not only we've got on the right track, but we've got over $1 billion of investment going on in the city, and have made what people have said are improvements in the things that are important to their lives. So again, there's always more work to be done. These are always work in progress, but I'm excited to continue to work every day for the people of Bridgeport and make it a Bridgeport, as I like to say, that works for everyone.
When you talk about millions of dollars in investment, that's something that you campaigned on, bringing in a number of development projects. Give us the rundown of what you campaigned on in 2015 and what's come to actually happen, Mayor Ganim.
Well, we've had one of the largest economic development initiatives, private money, over $500 million in cleaner energy. And we'll see finally the dismantling of the last coal-burning plant in the state of Connecticut on Bridgeport's waterfront, which will clear the way for even more exciting waterfront development right across from Steel Point, where tens of millions of dollars have gone in over the years. We now have a signature building there, the start of development next to Bass Pro with waterfront boat docks and so on. So that's one. You're also seeing rising up, where after 20 years of baseball, we're seeing one of the premier entertainment companies in the world, Live Nation, invest with us some $25 million in an outdoor amphitheater, which will bring in all the types of the venue for all types of music and entertainment that you'd like to see, not just for Bridgeport and Fairfield County, but I think will attract well beyond that. Those are 2 off the top of my head. Later in the week, if you give me another couple seconds, on what used to be the worst entry gateway to Bridgeport coming in from Fairfield, with old, tired, empty factory buildings, have now been converted by, again, outside investors investing money in Bridgeport and creating jobs, good paying, quality jobs. A $250 million conversion. It's called Cherry Street Lofts, because they're loft-style apartments where they took the old factories and turned them into really cool housing. Many of them affordable housing with an educational component and a retail component, and a part of Bridgeport that was not only underutilized but just really had a bad gateway visual, and now that's changing dramatically. So I can continue to go on to go to the East End, somewhat of a forgotten neighborhood by past administrations, where we're seeing the first main avenue, Stratford Avenue as it's called. It's a one-way street that runs through the east end of Bridgeport, poised for, and we'll have a visual there on Friday with community leaders who have made this thing happen in partnership with the city. The Civic Block, as it's called, developed finally. So I can keep going.
I'm curious, when you talk about good jobs, good paying jobs, how many jobs are we talking about with the Cherry Street facility?
Oh, hundreds of jobs. I can get you numbers, but I mean these are substantial. The bricklayers have been a part of that. The building trades have been a part of that. I mean these are the type of things that impact people's lives and families. There's been job training on some of these sites, so I'm excited. And Bridgeport jobs. I mean, when you look at it, one of the things I've made an important part of what I talk about when we support these projects is if it's housing, to have an affordable component of that housing, and it has to if it has public money in it, and some of these projects do. And two is that they have Bridgeport jobs. So we need to do more on that, and certainly enjoy talking about what we need to do over the next 4 years to continue the progress. But a key element to what we need to do in a city like Bridgeport, and in Bridgeport in particular, and all of our cities, is create job opportunities for residents.
It's interesting. I didn't hear you talk about bringing a casino to Bridgeport. That was something you lobbied hard for. Governor Lamont and lawmakers, they don't want to see a deal with MGM right away. They don't want to alienate the tribal compact with the two Connecticut tribes. Is this something that you hope to see in the future? Will you push again for a casino, Mayor Ganim?
I will, and I'll do it. I'm not a gambler, and I don't mean to say that as anything against gambling as a form of entertainment. And there's always concerns about the challenges you could have with any of these things like gambling. But at the beginning or the end of the day, it's about jobs, and you hit the nail on the head. But it's an entertainment. What we're talking about, and we could disagree over size, and I've always said. Almost as a cliche, it's not a beauty contest over who has a better schematic or drawing. It's about a practical ability to bring in investment with, if it's casino as an engine that drives a large, possibly a waterfront entertainment complex. I'm for that and have fought for it. So the backdrop of this last session was that I was up there. And I worked with many members of our legislative delegation, leaders like Chris Rosario, Dennis Bradley, and the rest of the delegation by and large, to say, hey, wait a minute, we're never going to get the full loaf, apparently, because of the competing interests that go on. This industry is too powerful and too complicated. But we do know that we want jobs for Bridgeport. We do know that Bridgeport probably presents one of the best locations along I-95, the waterfront, proximity to New York, with our own airport that's under review for development. And we will work with you. And the team, so to speak, the tribes, I'll call them the team, that has the monopoly in Connecticut, whether we like it or not, a law that was signed some decades ago says that they have the right to operate casinos in Connecticut. And so what segued into a lack of interest, apparently, by, you mentioned MGM, turned into a sprouting of interest by the tribes. So we pushed and will continue to push to see if we can make that happen again for jobs. I will tell you, though, one of the reasons it didn't go forward is some legislators were a clear disappointment. Some that are talking about in Bridgeport now what they might be able to do for Bridgeport, and I'm sure we'll get into the other candidates, were not as supportive, and people around the state were not as supportive. So that continues to be a challenge for us, and we can talk about that a little bit more and on some other questions.
Well, when you say lawmakers were a clear disappointment, who are you talking about? Because aren't they also representing their constituents? Is another casino in Connecticut really good for your community, Mayor Ganim? When you mention jobs, I mean, there's one-off jobs. So
I guess to get to it in the context of this mayoral race, and when Marilyn Moore was on here for her interview, and what she said repeatedly, she's not in favor of a casino. She thinks the answer to Bridgeport's challenges for jobs and for better quality, development is either a farmer's market or a food hub, which I don't really know what that is. But, it was somewhat disappointing when we were looking for people to champion what is the largest possible economic development project for the city with jobs, hundreds, we've talked about thousands of jobs, to have someone up there in a powerful position in the Senate be a no-show. And I think that's, something people need to look at when they're looking at who they want to be the champion, somebody, so to speak, on important issues as head of the state's largest city, in this case, who want to vote in Bridgeport's primary on September 10th.
But Mayor Ganim, what kind of jobs are you talking about? You're talking about retail, slot workers. I mean, really, how well-paying are those jobs? And if you look at MGM Springfield, a lesson that some people saw coming, MGM Springfield isn't even making the type of money that they said they would.
Oh, I think those are all, at least the Springfield example, I think you make a good point there. And I think that, what Bridgeport would look at is not something to the magnitude. I don't think you should overbuild. I think you should use it as an engine to drive and bring in other development. But I do think they are decent paying jobs. I've been to a number of these. Again, a job is a job. I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you've looked for work, but people that are listening, if you've looked for work and there's a job opportunity, we all become a little bit more humbler. I don't care what our background is and our skills. And it's important to have at least the opportunity. And I want those opportunities for people in the city of Bridgeport. So I think it's disappointing for anybody to turn away or not champion anything that can bring in investment, help lower property taxes, help bring money in for education, and then at the beginning, the end of the discussion, create jobs, bring a hotel in, food and beverage workers, construction jobs. I mean, these are not, no disrespect to your question, these are not throwaway jobs that we're talking about either.
But with construction jobs, once it's built, they've got to move on. Those aren't ones that stick around and help.
Right, and then we have more construction jobs. That's the goal. I mean, that's how kind of the world works. You're right. You build it, and when it's done, you move on to other jobs. And then there are people that run and operate them. So I guess you can. There's always, as there is with everything, the opportunity. I think my job, and I hope people that understand that we need to do more for our city, that are sensitive to, that are real, that have rolled up their sleeves and want to meet the challenges, understand this is not perfect, and it's not in place of any of the other development projects that we have going on in the city that are creating jobs. But it is one more that I'll fight for, and I wish others would too.
You mentioned economic development. There was another project that you were really pushing. I believe there was a New York developer. This is the redevelopment of the downtown Majestic and Poli Palace theaters, along with a hotel complex. What's happened with that, Mayor Ganim?
Poli and Majestic theaters have a historic place in Bridgeport. When I was running again for mayor, my mother, and she's still around, said, one thing you got to do is don't forget the Poli and Majestic. Thursday nights, this was the place to go. And when I go to the senior centers and mention it, it always gets a round of applause. But beyond the nostalgia of it, it is a part of Bridgeport's future. It isn't moving as quickly as I would like, but it is moving. They are investing money now in the remediation. That hasn't made the press recently, but the remediation is going on. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars going. There are letters of financing that have been shared with me, and there is the opportunity to announce shortly the hotel component of that. So I was told it would be further along than it is now, but I have seen they just finished one of their signature New York projects, and the developer showed me it's phenomenal. So I have confidence in the developer and that it's going forward, as are some of the other projects in the city. And those are local jobs. Those are going to be the type of thing that's going to light up that end of Main Street the way that, in a positive way, the way things like the Comedy Club and some of the other developments down the other end of downtown Main Street are doing for our downtown. When
you say moving forward, what does that mean? Does that mean like shovels in the ground within the next year?
Well, I don't know. I think the remediation is more inside the building. Remediation meaning that some of these old buildings have environmental issues. Like, I'd probably be guessing to say whether it's asbestos, whatever it is. But they've engaged and have hired and begun. That's the first process before they can start kind of, in the construction phase, going to the next step. They have to make sure it's environmentally clean. That's true of a lot of the historic buildings that we've kind of recaptured and repurposed in Bridgeport. And that's why it takes a long time. But one of the things that I like about what we've done and what we continue to do, and I give credit to some of the past or prior administrations, is we tried to retain some of the historic character of a lot of the downtown. Some cities have gone ahead and said, let's knock this one down, knock that one down. We've done some of that, the ones that we can't. But a lot of them are historic capturing or recapturing, and they do so much to add character while creating affordable housing, which is push the population for downtown residents up from hundreds to thousands. So some good stuff going on. Anybody that doesn't know that, or anybody that thinks they want to run for mayor and doesn't know can't be fluent on the amphitheater, the comedy club, the Poli Majestic, PS&G, the Civic Block, Cherry Street, and doesn't know about that stuff, this is not a place where you can just get out and just say, make some colorful soundbite speeches and think you're going to run the largest city and be effective at it. There's too much at stake. Too many lives are in the balance, whether you work here or you live here, and it's too complicated and complex of a series of challenges. So I'd ask people, and I was kind of disappointed. I went to a forum, and there were 3 people sitting with me, and I couldn't understand what any of them were saying. Some didn't know that seniors even get free passes to the parks. I mean, it's just little stuff and big stuff. So it's an important job. It's an important day on September 10th for people to come out. It's not about good sound bites and things like that. It's about running the city effectively and keeping the progress going.
Mayor Joe Ganim is in studio, rather at WSHU, joining us today for a sit-down conversation why he's running for re-election with the September 10th primary coming up. You can join us, 888-720-WNPR, if you have a question for Mayor Ganim. Ben's calling. Ben, what's your question?
Hi. I was kind of disturbed a little while ago to hear the mayor say that the PSEG gas plant is cleaner energy, because it's really not. And I volunteer with 350 Connecticut, and we were there with local activists fighting against this plant because it not only raises the risk of explosions in Bridgeport from the pressurized gas, it also doesn't help the asthma problem for people that are in the city because it's still leaking methane into the air. And furthermore, the coal plant is not closed yet. It's running for the next 2 years while this plant is going. And we've seen nationwide that gas plants are closing because they're not used anymore. So those jobs aren't permanent. So the PSEG deal is not something that the mayor should be bragging about. It's something that he should be regretful about, because that should have been allowed to happen.
No, I appreciate your perspective, but somewhat disagree with you. First of all, I agree. It's still fossil, and so it's not what we're doing with other things like the thermal loop, which we're doing for our downtown, which I could share. Maybe you're familiar with the thermal loop, but that's innovative, clean. It's not wind, which we're doing. We're looking at doing soon as well, and solar, which we've done acres of solar on our landfill. Covering an old landfill. So we do have, and we are innovative in the areas of clean. But this is better, and we are decommissioning the last coal burning plant in the state of Connecticut. Granted, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's under an order and a decree, and that is good news. And that will get rid of coal burning and the smokestacks. And we want to talk about asthma and some of the other implications that we've seen in the numbers. So we're making progress, and I appreciate the fact that it's far from perfect. But it is better, cleaner. It is needed energy. It does provide energy for 500,000 homes, and it's 385 megawatts of cleaner. So I respect the extent of the environmental perspective that you bring. But at the end of the day, it's also a $550 million investment that created hundreds of jobs. I would have liked to see more. But a lot of it is technology driven, and it does help us fight what's higher taxes in an urban center where the state seems to have forgotten forgotten that a regressive tax like property taxes has an impact on families who are struggling to make ends meet. So there's a lot of balancing of factors, but I do appreciate your perspective, Ben, and I hope that you can see it's better, but far from perfect, as I think we have to kind of look at a lot of things.
You can join our conversation with Mayor Ganim. He's running for re-election. If you have a question for him, 888-720-WNPR or 888-720-9677. We'll be back after a short break. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. The mayor of Bridgeport is my guest today. Joe Ganim is running for re-election after staging a comeback in 2015. He's the Democratic Party's endorsed candidate for the September 10th Democratic primary. His challenger is State Senator Marilyn Moore, who petitioned her way onto the ballot. Now, do you live in Bridgeport? How would you rate the job Mayor Ganim's done over the last 4 years? Do you think he deserves to be reelected? Join the conversation, 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Mayor, we heard a caller talk about asthma in your city, and I was curious, as mayor, what have you been doing to help the children in Bridgeport in terms of their education, the health conditions that some have because of, say, poor air quality? I haven't really heard you talk about the kids in the city of Bridgeport.
Well, I certainly talk about the kids a lot. As a matter of fact, we put a strong effort. The Board of Education cut the distance or increased the distance, cut the bus routes, and we encouraged them through a partnership with the new superintendent to put up a hard found from various sources over $1 million to restore that. And I want to thank them for voting to accept those monies to put those bus routes back in place for safety concerns as well as convenience of some 1,200 families and parents before school starts. So I went to the beginning of school, the gathering of all of the administrators, and thanked them for their efforts in the schools every day. But also we need to do more. We're going to be announcing later on this week what is going to be the most comprehensive school program, a capital improvement program since I was mayor some 20 years ago, where we're going to take a good look at rebuilding. We were in Harding High School, the new Harding High School yesterday. Central's been revamped to a certain extent and almost a new Central. But this will be a new Bassick High School finally coming on the boards. And all the schools, the infrastructure, and continue to make a commitment where we can with partnerships with the Board of Ed to do more for students in the classroom. But there needs to be more on things like what are we doing for young people that are either the victims of or involved in gun violence. And I don't think we can do enough on that, whether it's locally, statewide, or nationally. But I've tried to be an advocate. I've been in Hartford. I've been in Washington. I took Harding High Schools up to Hartford to advocate for more stronger, more sensible gun laws in the state of Connecticut, and tried to expand what we can for after-school programs in the city of Bridgeport. And in some ways have been a leader, or where we can lead, and at times a participant, partner, or a follower. But whatever we can do in general areas, both in education and in opportunities for young people, we try to do that. When they cut summer youth money, for instance, 2 years ago, the state cut the money. And we had we weren't in the greatest financial situation as a city. We were still kind of cobbling together from the deficit that was left by my prior mayor. We were a little out over our skis, as I said, and said, you know what? School's going to be out soon. We need to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're going to come up with that money. If the state puts it back, fine. If they don't, we need to do it anyways, and we did. And I've tried to make a constant commitment on those type of initiatives. They're never enough. 150 jobs, let's say, for young people when there's 600 applicants. So we need to do more. We need to do more, but it needs to be clear, consistent policies year after year. And we need help on a state level. We're not getting on a federal level. We've gotten some on a state level, but we need more there. We need stronger advocates for these type of things and for an urban agenda for our city to continue to prosper.
Everyone often points to the state needing to provide more support, but what about just locally? Would you say that the Bridgeport Board of Education is doing the best job they can? They do have a reputation for a lot of infighting. As mayor, do you think you need to have a bigger role on the Board of Ed?
So let me turn to the positive on that. Last night they voted in favor, so that was kind of an act of partnership. The new superintendent has clearly laid out an agenda of partnership and has had instilled confidence with leadership on the city council as a result. And therefore, the advocacy for hard-sought precious dollars in partnership will continue to reap benefits so that there's an accountability level. We've just recently, there was this whole cry out by, it's a political season. So they all say, the Board of Ed doesn't short $5 million. Well, you know what? There's a partnership that has addressed that. So, and then with this capital initiative that we're going to launch later this week, I think we're going to start to position ourselves as we should, where we left off years ago, making incremental improvements, and then lauding our bright lights, some of our students that just really shine, but probably don't get the recognition because they get kind of overwhelmed with a lot of the bickering that goes back and forth. So there's an election on September 10th. A school of board members are on that ballot. Top-line endorsed candidates will bring fresh faces, young people, and I think a hope for the continuation of a partnership for the betterment of the schools. But they got to come out and vote the top line. I'm going to give myself a commercial. Vote the top line for Democrats on September 10th if you want better schools. That's the end of the story. I can tell you that.
You can join our conversation with Mayor Ganim, especially if you live in Bridgeport. He's running for re-election, as he mentioned. The number 888-720-WNPR or 888-720-9677. Mike's calling from Bridgeport. Mike, go ahead and just be brief with your question. We only have so much time.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I just want to respond to what the mayor's been saying because it's really difficult for young people to prosper in a city that is actively disinvesting in them. And Mayor Ganim has actively underfunded the school district, shifted money away from the school system into the police, recently spent several millions of dollars on a tiger for the Beardsley Zoo when the schools, again, have no money. There's schools that have no paper in the classrooms.
Is there a question?
Old textbooks.
Is there a question, or you want to do a commercial?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
So my question is specifically speaking about young people, which you just were. The question is, we have two young people, two youth of color in Bridgeport that were murdered by the Bridgeport police for the past 2 years. 15-year-old Jason Negron and 18-year-old Corbin Cooper. Mayor Ganim, you had the authority to fire the officers involved in Jason Negron's murder since May 9, 2017, and you have chosen not to take action, not to fire Bridgeport police officer James Boulay, a white man from Ansonia, who has been allowed to police Bridgeport and has been allowed to remain a cop since May 9, 2017, when he opened fire and killed 15-year-old Jason Negron, a young Puerto Rican child. And we still don't know the names of the officers involved in the murder of 18-year-old Corbin Cooper on June 14, 2018. My question is, when are you going to hold those officers accountable?
Yeah, appreciate your question.
Go ahead, Mayor Ganim.
I'm not sure what the question was.
He wants to hear. Hold on, Mayor Ganim. I'm the host, so I'm going to tell you what he asked. He asked if you're going to hold Officer James Boulay accountable for the death of Jason Negron. I know that the state police, they investigated and cleared the officer, but I think this also points to there is an issue in your community about people having trust with the police, and also want to know what you're doing about making sure that there is that trust and accountability.
Absolutely. There was just a lot packed in there. So, but certainly on that topic, and whether he asked it or not, let's talk about it, because it's critically important on a number of fronts, and terribly tragic all the way around. On the family side, on the loss, everything that happened, and it's a moment where there's no way to kind of say anything that doesn't have a sad kind of feel to it on this all the way around. But I will tell you the elements of what happened as far as an investigation, because of state law, were taken over immediately by the Chief State's Attorney's Office. The local police lost jurisdiction from the moment that happened. And if you want to fault or blame or credit, we have to look at exactly what happened. They did, and to my dissatisfaction, took a very long time. I sent a letter up to the Chief State's Attorney's Office saying, release the videos, and they kind of got mad at me. But bottom line was, they did their investigation, they put it all up online, and they came out with the results. They're the sole jurisdiction, if you will, on that and these matters because of state laws that were passed, whether we like it or not. And I think they were done for good reason. It takes it out of the hands of local, where officers can be familiar with other officers, and so therefore it may create a perception or reality of bias. And the results are what they are, and that's when let me finish. I got to be at least as long as the question.
We only have so much time, Mayor Ganim.
I'm sorry, it's your show, but if you want me to answer it, I will.
Well, I just want to ask a follow-up, because there's the Jason Negron question. There's a Jason Negron case, but there's also all this other stuff happening within the Bridgeport Police Department. Investigation of excessive force by Bridgeport officers at a Halloween party in 2017. An internal affairs report finding 17 of the officers engaged in misconduct. There's another case of an officer that was filmed hitting a suspect in the back of the head. What's going on within the police department? And I'm just curious, as mayor, what are you doing about it?
Absolutely. And I've said on that officer has no place, after seeing that video, no place on the Bridgeport Police Department, and have called for accountability on that, number one. Number two, all the officers, any officer, and I feel strongly about this as mayor, as a citizen, will be anybody that gets to walk around, and I have great respect for our law enforcement, and we have many great officers. But if you walk around as law enforcement and have the ability to carry a gun, there's a higher level. And we just fired an officer last week. I've called for and will continue to demand accountability at all levels within our police department, because that's what has to happen. It doesn't happen fast enough for me, as it doesn't happen fast enough for others. But officer was fired this past week. I've said, probably prematurely, that what I've seen in that video calls for that officer to no longer be a member of the Bridgeport Police Department, and will continue to call for that level of accountability in our department. I hope other mayors across the country and police chiefs across the country who face these similar challenges will continue to do the same. That's what we need to do. So I'm with with all those that feel that way on this topic. And whether I do it outspokenly, which I've done recently, or in holding accountability with members of the City Council, what that department needs to do, we'll continue to do it.
Do you stand behind hiring Police Chief Armando Perez, again, somebody that you've known for a long time? There were people in your city who didn't want to see Police Chief Perez in that role.
Of course there weren't, but there were overwhelmingly people that responded, community groups from across the city, and that did want Chief Perez. He had developed good relationships with community groups across the city, had dealt well in his term as acting police chief. Now, if he's not doing his job, I'll hold him accountable as well. I've done that with all my department heads and will continue to do it, whether we know each other well or we don't. And I think that my record with people in my administration have been moved, have been let go, have been disciplined, and that will continue. It has to, or I'm not doing, the job that I think that I need to do and be responsive. But in the interim, while we've done that, we've been able to hold budgets together, hold the line on taxes for 3 years, cut taxes slightly this year, have reached out and actually have given more money in the areas of education, have seen over $1 billion of investment in the city of Bridgeport. And those are the type of things, I know you're going to run out of time, type of things that people need to look at as they go forward to the September 10th primary, consider whether or not Bridgeport's on the right track and we're getting things done, and whether, going around just saying I can do a better job, because certainly the Ganim administration is far from perfect, that have put any comprehensive plans out there that give people confidence and trust that they really can run this city with all of its challenges. It is a tough job. I was encouraged when I heard people saying they wanted to run, they had ideas. I'm clearly disappointed at what I've seen about a lack of a vision for job creation, economic development by my opponent, a lack of any plans or comprehensive ideas on what can be done better or a way to do it. And this is a real important election coming up on September 10th. People need to take a good hard look at what's on the line here with the city's future and come out and vote. And I hope that they'll do that.
Mayor Ganim, I wanted to ask you, there is an FBI probe into alleged misappropriation of money from the sale of scrap metal. I understand a deputy was fired, and John Rickey, head of public facilities, he was docked a month's pay. Is that enough to send a message to city workers that when there's these kinds of things happening on behind the scenes, that's not acceptable?
It's clearly not acceptable. And there was a recommendation by Labor Relations and a variety of department heads that were charged with investigating this, and it's well documented in interviews and was done. And at some point, it becomes an issue for law enforcement. And that's what happened in this case. And when law enforcement takes over, civil and city step back. And law enforcement will do their job. If they've done it completely, they'll look at, hopefully find out where the money went. This is not the first city this has happened in. It doesn't make it right. It's old school. It's unacceptable. And it took as strong as action as I was recommended to take on these employees, fired people that were in high positions and docked others. But, Stanford had the same issue. Fairfield had the same issue. Greenwich had the same issue. And somehow people think in public works that, or thought in the past, that was acceptable practices. Message goes out. It's not acceptable, whether it's FBI or state police or local police. If there's money's taken, people are going to get, I assume, if they can prove it, they're going to handle it. Civilly, there's only so much we can do. We took what was appropriate action. I think we've sent a clear message out. We'll continue to do that to anybody in the city of Bridgeport who works for the city of Bridgeport who is not doing their job. They'll be held accountable. The
FBI is still investigating. So do you think that this action that you took, this employee that was fired, another one again, penalized by docking a month's pay, does that end there, Mayor Ganim? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. That you'd have to ask that law enforcement on how what they see, what they do. They do their own. They're completely separate and independent. We did send them everything that we had as we went along. And there was communications early on as soon as we found this stuff out from, I think it was city attorney and so on, to make sure that what we had was provided to them. But from there, I couldn't speak. I wouldn't disrespect their offices, let them do their job. And we did what we could do civilly, internally, to the point that we could. And I will continue to do that as mayor, because accountability is important, and we have to make sure that we have people in place and processes going on that can serve the 150,000 people every day, and I look forward to doing it for the next 4 years.
We're running out of time, but listener Ralph wanted to ask you, Bridgeport's trying to create housing downtown. What is the city doing to connect downtown to its waterfront park in a way that's more walkable and bikeable?
Yeah, the great thing about Steel Point was we put in the public promenade. We made it an essential piece of it. So even if you don't go to the restaurant there, which is great, or any of it, you have a right as a resident or as just the public to walk around the public promenade. That is a $20 million investment of some public-private money, and really begin to enjoy that. The ferry dock and the ferry will soon be moving over there. That's another exciting element of what's going on there. The bridge. Finally, the bridge that will connect that part of the city to the downtown is underway. So infrastructure projects are going on, maybe not as glitzy and glamorous, but things that need to happen. And we're trying to do a gateway on Park Avenue to the Seaside Park from Park Avenue, and continue to kind of do beautification of the Park City. One of the things maybe I don't talk about enough, but I like to see happen: trees planting, flowers planting, streetscapes. As much as that as we can do, at the same time maintaining our commitments, our critical commitments to public safety, balancing a budget, keeping taxes down, commitments to education. These are the type of things that people talk about when I knock on their doors, and I try and be responsive as I can and let them know we still have more work to do, but we're trying to get it done every day for them.
Bridgeport Mayor Joe Ganim running for re-election. His name on the primary ballot September 10th alongside challenger State Senator Marilyn Moore. He joined us today from the studios of WSHU in Fairfield, Connecticut. Mayor Ganim, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up, we're going to get some analysis from someone who reports on Bridgeport daily. That's Brian Lockhart. You can join us too. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We just heard from Bridgeport Mayor Joe Ganim, who's seeking re-election. Will he win easily primary day, September 10th? Does the general election this November even matter for this longtime politician in a heavily Democratic city? Joining us now for some analysis via Skype, Brian Lockhart, who covers Bridgeport for the Connecticut Post. Brian, welcome back.
Good morning, Lucy.
So Mayor Ganim on the defensive today. Just curious what you thought about some of his response to callers' questions.
It's interesting, on the gas plant, that was actually a project that he inherited from the prior mayor, Bill Finch. So it's not a Ganim project alone. It was something that he had inherited, and it's, to be fair to this mayor, Mayor Bill Finch had a reputation as the quote unquote green mayor. But Mayor Finch did not want to lose PSEG either. They're one of the largest taxpayers in Bridgeport. And so it was sort of a compromise. No one really wanted the coal plant, but the gas plant was viewed as a compromise, a somewhat cleaner way to provide energy, but by also keeping PSEG on the tax rolls. Go ahead.
Oh, and so I'm just curious, when we caller brought up Jason Negron, again, this was a teenager that was killed by police. The state investigated, cleared the Officer Boulay. This really, I guess, changed the tone of the interview. This is something that Mayor Ganim is still pretty defensive about. I mean, what's your take on when you're talking with residents in the city of Bridgeport with how Mayor Ganim is whether he's answering or acknowledging this level of distrust in the community when it comes to the police?
Something he didn't mention is that his administration earlier this year did announce that they were hiring a special consultant. I believe he's a former Washington, D.C. police chief, Chief Ramsey, who was supposed to spend the summer kind of analyzing the department, looking at these types of situations, looking at how cops are disciplined, to try and make improvements. And the results of his work have not been announced yet. And really, he's been doing it very quietly. The city has not been talking about what Chief Ramsey has been up to. It's definitely a sensitive topic for the mayor. Something I've noticed recently is that he has come out more forcefully and making more forceful statements about allegedly bad cops. You mentioned the officer who just the other weekend, about a week and a half ago, was caught on video hitting a suspect with his gun. And immediately that day, the mayor issued a very strong statement. That really hasn't always been the case going forward. He has been more measured in his responses. Typically he wants to allow the internal investigations to play out. But he is making stronger statements as we get closer to the primary. So you have to believe that he is feeling some pressure to kind of stand up there and show more leadership when it comes to trying to take control of the police department.
It sounds like he also is still standing behind his choice as police chief, Armando Perez. This is someone that worked for him way back when he was mayor the first few terms before Mayor Ganim went to prison on federal corruption charges. I'm just curious. Do you think that kind of loyalty will persist? Because there are these other issues happening within the police department.
They are very close, and I think it would take a lot for this mayor to sever. I think it would be a lot to break that relationship apart. I mean, we also have to remember that Chief Perez has a 5-year contract. Now, does that mean it's impossible for the mayor to fire him? No. But I have a hard time seeing that. I have a hard time imagining when that day would be. Chief Perez is liked, and the mayor was correct that there were a lot of community leaders, a lot of community groups that felt comfortable with Chief Perez. He is a very likable guy. The question became, did he have the management experience? And frankly, was he also too politically tied in Bridgeport? Not only is he close to the mayor, but he's also close to the head of the union, Sergeant Chuck Paris. The union had actually pushed for Chief Perez to become chief. And, you could argue, should the police chief be so close to both his boss and also the head of the union? Shouldn't there be some tension there? Wouldn't it be better if there's some tension there? Now, to be fair to Chief Perez, there is also an argument to be made that he doesn't have enough help at the top. When he took over as acting chief, he inherited 4 deputy police chiefs, and there was also an assistant police chief at that time. Since then, 2 of the deputies have been defunded. A 3rd deputy has been out for several months and is not expected to return. So he is left with 1 deputy, and there is still a vacancy in the assistant chief slot. So there is talk about trying to fill some of those positions and perhaps get him some of the help he needs at the top to better manage the department.
Mayor Ganim was knocking his challenger, State Senator Marilyn Moore, without mentioning her name, talking about all the things that are happening in Bridgeport, mocking her idea of how to bring investment to the city. How vulnerable do you think he is? You mentioned, especially with the police issue, he's being more forceful in his comments. But is this something, does he have to worry on primary day in a heavily Democratic city with name recognition that he has?
I don't think he's taking it for granted. Let me put it that way. I do think you see him out campaigning, working hard. You see him trying to roll out different initiatives to get positive headlines. I mean, something he recently did that he didn't mention is he proposed some senior tax relief. And that sort of came out of the blue. I mean, there's always talk about lowering taxes in Bridgeport. He had proposed a tax break in the latest budget. He didn't get as large of a tax cut as he wanted because there was a tug of war with the council over using some of that money to invest in education. He did get a small tax break, but then sort of out of the blue a couple weeks ago, he announced he wanted senior tax relief. And so now the city council, who are also all up for reelection, are moving speedily ahead to try and make that happen. So it's pretty clear, I think, that he is working hard to try and ensure a September 10th primary victory. I think he may be sweating a little bit. He does have some vulnerabilities. One of the things that's interesting, it was interesting to hear him criticize Senator Moore because it is true. One of the things that I hear, one of the reservations I hear people have about her is they don't know if she is up to the job of running the city. Whatever you think of Mayor Ganim, he certainly does have the experience. You can't deny that. And Senator Moore she would be fresh to this. She does have executive experience, having worked at AT&T several years ago. She ran a nonprofit. She's certainly no stranger to government, having been in the state Senate. But Mayor Ganim undeniably does have more experience. That being said, at some point, way back in 1991, voters gave a fresh-faced Joe Ganim a chance to run Bridgeport. So there is also something to be said for, trying somebody new and giving them an opportunity.
Brian Lockhart covers Bridgeport for the Connecticut Post. As we learn more about the mayoral race, we focused in on the Democrats, the incumbent Joe Ganim, who we just heard from, and we've also spoken to State Senator Marilyn Moore. I mentioned Senator Moore because something that she really hits back on with Ganim is the ability where he often will hire a lot of his allies. The City Hall has a lot of his supporters. One time maybe some of them were for former Mayor Finch, but the idea that there is, you support him and there's a way for you to get, in at City Hall. And I'm just curious, do people in the city, are they tired of that cronyism?
Some are. I guess the only way to judge that is when the elections are over. And if Marilyn Moore has won, then we know that enough, because she, as you recall, she has said, I have not promised anyone any jobs. She wants the best people to try and move the city forward. In politics, sometimes that is easier said than done. I have a hard time imagining that we will not see some of Marilyn Moore's close allies get jobs in the city if she is elected. Mayor Ganim did surround himself when he was reelected with very familiar faces. A ton of people who helped get him reelected. And there had been some talk at the time that because of what had happened, because of the corruption scandal that took him down in 2003, that when he came in, perhaps he would avoid sort of the political appointments and cast a wider net for the best and the brightest. Go ahead.
We just have a couple of minutes left. Obviously, the primary is coming up. So what are you going to be looking for from both of these campaigns? And we should mention there are 3 Republicans also running in this heavily Democratic city.
Basically, right now, energy and in terms of sort of these armies that they have, Mayor Ganim is definitely out there campaigning. He's working really hard. He has union endorsements, so the expectation is that the unions will have their members out there helping him as well, assisting his campaign to get the message out. Marilyn Moore has her own union endorsements. She also has the Working Families Party. Working Families is going to be very interesting to watch. They have been active in Bridgeport. They have been successful in Bridgeport in the past, in prior races, including Senator Moore's. But this is the first time they have gotten actively involved in a mayoral race in Bridgeport. So I think it's going to be a real test for them to see if they can match the quote-unquote Democratic machine which Mayor Ganim has on his side. So those are things that are definitely we're going to be looking for. And then obviously it's going to be very interesting because if Marilyn Moore does lose September 10th, she has said she plans to petition her way onto the November general election ballot as the Working Families candidate. So if she loses September 10th, that's only going to be part of the battle. We're still going to have a couple months of campaigning between her and Mayor Ganim ahead of us.
And Brian, before we go, can you remind us the 3 Republican candidates running in the city of Bridgeport's mayor's race?
Sure. The nominee is a John Rodriguez, and then there are 2 petition candidates, Ethan Book, Deshaun Francis. John Rodriguez and Ethan Book have run unsuccessfully for other offices in the past. Deshaun is kind of a new face. He's 23. He's also new to Bridgeport. He moved here, I believe, if I recall, from New York, was living in Stratford, but going to school in Bridgeport, and decided to run for mayor. And it's, the numbers are overwhelming. I mean, whichever of them wins the primary, there are 46,500 registered Democrats in Bridgeport, 4,311 registered Republicans. So it's definitely difficult for a Republican in Bridgeport.
Well, we thank you, Brian Lockhart, for giving us that needed context in the city of Bridgeport. He writes for the Connecticut Post. Brian, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Lucy.
He joined today via Skype. Today's show produced by Carmen Baskoff. Thanks to Lydia Brown on the phones and also to our technical producer, Kyone Wolf. We're still trying to figure out the candidates and if they'll come in before the primary for the Hartford mayoral race. We'll keep you posted on that. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.